forward to today.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay.
Is Queen ready?
Okay, I'd like to start the meeting. We all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes
So
from the
moved.
April 20th? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Were there any changes?
No.
So 2 typos, Jen. Let's see. Appointments, 5. The nominated should be the nomination was forwarded. And under 9, section 9, there were no litigation or personnel matters to discuss. It just says not. It's just typo.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay. All in favor of those 2 changes?
Aye.
Aye.
It's going to be a lot easier.
Yes, it will go quickly, we think. Okay. Tax collector refunds. I've assigned them. They're in the file. Everything looks to be in order. Do I have a motion to accept the tax refunds?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Moving right along. Request of the use of the town green. The Fairfield Museum and History Center requests the use of the town green for their free community picnic Memorial Day, May 30th, after the parade. Do I have a motion to approve the request for the use of town green?
So moved.
Second. I just want to point out that the Fairfield Museum maintains $2 million in general aggregate liability insurance, which will cover the event. So we're satisfied with that. Let's see, they'll have food vendors, educational programs, and games for residents to enjoy following the parade. It will be open to the public, and you're all invited to attend. So all in favor of the, did I already do that? All in favor of the request to use the town green, say aye.
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 Ask the public?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to remember to ask the public, it's moving too quickly. Are there any comments from the public regarding the use of the town green, or the tax collector refund, or the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I will approve the request for the use of the town green. Appointments. There's an opening on the Golf Commission, and Ryan Morris has submitted his resume.
Yeah, I'd like to put Ryan's name into nomination.
I'll second that nomination.
And I've spoken to the Golf Commission about that, and they're looking forward to having Ryan aboard. And so I'd like to put him forth as his appointment as to be a new member of the Golf Commission.
Any comments from the public? Okay. I'd like to say Ryan actually has been shown interest in this since 2008, and I'm happy to second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Ryan, congratulations. There's also one more vacancy still. There was a female member of the Golf Commission who just resigned as well last meeting. So we are seeking somebody to replace her. So if anyone has interest, please submit their applications, their resumes to the First Selectman's office.
Is that up to be, is there a political affiliation to that person? I'm just not sure where we stand with that commission.
I'm trying to remember whether it was a Democrat or a Republican.
We'd have to check on
I don't
that.
All right,
recall.
because I know Ryan replaced a Republican who
Yeah.
came off. So
Right.
if you could just find that out,
Sure.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Next. Director of Community and Economic Development, Mark Barnhart. He's going to discuss the public hearing for the Neighborhood Assistance Act.
Just briefly, as both of you know, this is a state program that provides a tax credit to businesses that have a state corporate tax liability, businesses that make charitable contributions to eligible nonprofits and municipal agencies there's programs that are approved locally by the town. We did solicit applications under this program. We received one application from Wakeman's Boys and Girls Club for after-school programming targeting the McKinley school population. The state requires that we have a public hearing and that the legislative body of the town actually approve these designations in order for it to be submitted to the state by July 1st. So that's, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but if you want to have allow for public comment, thank you.
Okay. Do you have a motion to?
I just want to ask a couple questions. You've come before, and I was in the RTM, you came before, and I know you normally float those forms around for applicants and stuff like that, but there hasn't been a ton of interest in that. Is there a reason why you think that there's not a ton of interest? Is it just that some of the corporations are not, in this economy, not looking to make these type of donations to some of the nonprofits, or is there another reason?
There's probably multiple reasons. It's a pretty convoluted process. Municipal agencies or nonprofits have to first apply and be designated as an eligible recipient by the town. They have to go through, it's not a very lengthy application process, not terribly difficult to fill out, but they have to go through that process. And then they have to go through then they have to go to the next step and actually solicit charitable donations from businesses that owe a state corporate tax liability. So once you fill out the application, that doesn't necessarily mean you get any money out of it. So it's a two-step or three-step process. The business, in order to actually claim the tax credit, then has to apply to the state in order to get the tax credit by October 1st. So for a lot of reasons, I think some groups may have made the decision that it's not worth their time and effort, and maybe they haven't seen a lot of interest from businesses in the past to make those contributions. It really works best where you have an organization that has some connections or ties to a local business that has a state corporate tax liability and is looking to, obviously reduce that tax liability in some way. So if you have those connections already in hand, it's a good way to marry the two, but it is a lengthy process, and just going through this first step doesn't necessarily guarantee any funds. So it varies from year to year. We've seen as many as 6 to 7 applicants at one time, and as few as 0 to 1 is in the case. Some years we don't get any. So we continue to do it because it's not a big effort on the part of the town and my staff, myself, to put it together and run the program. So we oftentimes hear from nonprofits they're looking for ways in which to raise funds, so we continue to put it out there. If you have any other suggestions as to ways in which we could get more interest in it, we move into those suggestions.
And I take it that you've talked to the nonprofits in town, so
We do.
they know, I mean, that's the best place to do it, is
Right.
for them to find somebody for it, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. If we know businesses that are looking for
Yeah.
ways in which they can contribute to community organizations, we'll certainly make the
Propose it.
appropriate connections,
Mhm.
but oftentimes they know who's out there better than we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'm so.
Second? Yeah, well, I thought I had, don't I have to get the motion approved and then second and then get public comment? Or Judy, you're my parliamentarian voice.
I'm sure Mr. Walsh can help.
We probably go to public comment first after we talk about it, I guess. I think that's the normal process we do it. We normally move it for discussion, I guess, first. Is that what we do?
That's what I was
Yeah,
trying to get a
yeah,
motion
yeah.
for, but you
Oh,
started
okay.
to talk.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
That's all right, I'm
sorry.
just trying to find out if we're
All right, why
following
don't
the
we move
process.
I'll move for discussion since I've already discussed it.
Second.
And second. Now we can have
Okay,
public comment.
public comment? Anyone from the public like to discuss the Neighborhood Assistance Act? Okay, and hearing none?
I will move it for approval.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, okay. All righty. Let's see. Director of Community and Economic Development again for number 7 and number 8.
Multiple appearances.
Excuse me, number 8, yes.
Again, as both of you are aware, the town is an entitlement community under the Community Development Block Grant Program. We receive funds annually from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for various programs and initiatives at the local level. We did receive a fairly significant cut this year. We're anticipating receiving a fairly significant cut in funding, basically a 16% reduction, about $100,000 less than the current year, which obviously has pretty significant implications in terms of the various programs and activities that we do fund. We can only allocate 15% towards public service activities. That traditionally is where we get the majority of our applications, programs like Operation Hope, Grasping by the Sea, things like that. many of which you're all very familiar with. And we can use 20% towards administrative costs, and we typically allocate the maximum of both of those categories, and then split the rest between capital projects and housing initiatives. I've provided you our proposed annual action plan, which, pending your approval, would then have to be submitted to the RTM for approval. We need to conduct 2 public hearings, one of which we had back in February, the second of which is actually scheduled for this evening. Get public comment. Pending RTM action in late May, we'll then have to prepare an annual plan to be submitted to HUD by August. So happy to answer any questions. Most of the organizations have been funded in the past. Obviously, with the big cut in funding from HUD, we had to make some reductions in funding for nonprofits under the public service activity, but we tried to minimize the impact as much as possible. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question. Do you have
Can I move it for public, for discussion?
discussion? Thank you. Second.
Yeah.
The DPW street sidewalk improvements, do you have a
Yes.
location for that?
This year, in accordance with our consolidated plan, we're looking to do some sidewalks, basically infill sections in our Black Rock, Tungus Hill neighborhoods, which was, in fact, all of the comments we received on our consolidated plan dealt with the need for more sidewalks, or to fill in sections of sidewalks, or to replace deteriorated sections of sidewalks in those areas. So we're working with Public Works to identify those areas within those neighborhoods that are eligible to do that work. Traditionally, in the past, we've done a lot of street work.
Tell us a little bit more about the, I think JHE's Jewish Home for the Elderly.
Yes,
And
sorry.
improvements.
The Jewish Home had submitted a number of applications to make improvements to various facilities at their Jefferson Street address. The one that really fit within our funding levels that we're looking at doing is the building roof. The roof does need to be replaced up there. It is an eligible activity, and so we would look to partner with them to replace the roof as part of our next year's plan. We've done a lot of roof work recently. Currently, we're working on Operation Hope to replace the roof there at the shelter.
Okay, do you want to just run down the rest of the items? Because I think then people who are at home can understand what the items are, and maybe you have suggestions come to the meeting.
Is there public service activities?
Just go down from there, I think, micro enterprise.
Under public service, we have funded in the past Operation Hope, providing operating support for their emergency shelter, as well as support for their permanent supportive housing units here in town. We have funded the Center for Women and Families, their court advocacy program. They now have a satellite office here in Fairfield, where they provide support for victims of domestic violence. Fairfield Counseling Services, we provide funding toward case management counseling, primarily family counseling. Grassmere by the Sea is operated by Jewish Home. It's an adult daycare facility. Fairfield Museum provides an enrichment program targeting students at McKinley Elementary School. The Arts Council has applied for and received funding in the past for their Arts and Community Program, which is typically targeted towards seniors, either at the Senior Center or at the Fairfield Housing Authority and other locations here in town. We've provided some small funding to Connecticut Legal Services in the past several years. Jewish Home has an elder abuse program. It's a fairly innovative program that they started here a few years back, and we provide a small amount of funding to support that initiative. Volunteer Services for the Blind is a group that tries to link volunteers with people that are afflicted with blindness or sight disabilities. We provided some funding for the last couple of years to the Board of Ed for vocational training program for students with developmental disabilities. Under non-housing needs, we talked about the street and sidewalk improvements and the improvements to the Jewish homes tandem building roof. We provide some funding for micro-enterprise development, which is a program where we provide a small amount of seed capital for small businesses looking to start up in town that either the business owner themselves or the employees are low moderate income. And under our housing programs, we have funding as in years past to assist people to buy a home in Fairfield, first-time homebuyer assistance, as well as to repair existing homes provided that the applicants are income eligible. And as noted here in my remarks, so a lot of our programs are aimed at persons of low moderate income or areas of town that have low moderate income populations.
Okay, so if anybody's needing of those services due to some extenuating circumstances, it would be a good time to approach your office and get some more information on that.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Just have a couple questions.
Sure.
In regards to the public service activities, the organizations you mentioned, has there been any major changes this year, either additions or subtractions? And if you could tell us the reasons why.
Yeah, the biggest two changes, obviously given the reduction, fairly significant reduction, that translates about a $20,000 to $25,000 cut for public service activity funding. We decided, we're recommending that we not fund for the upcoming year Supportive Housing Works, which is a housing collaborative. They do good work. It's not a reflection on the organization in any sense, but they have had some difficulty documenting income eligibility for their applicants in this past year. And the same holds true with Renew Associates. It's a faith-based counseling organization. They've only been able to serve one low moderate income Fairfield resident to date. So given the reductions in funding, we felt those monies could be best spent elsewhere. And that's, other than that, I would say every organization here has seen a small reduction in their funding.
And this funding that we've been able to get, this block grant funding, has been consistently going down year over year, correct?
For the most part, the trend has been generally downward. We did have a couple, if you look at the chart, there's been years that have been better than others, but I would say over the last 8-9 years, the trend has generally been a downward progression.
Is this something you see going away eventually, or, I mean, have you heard rumors of that?
There's always rumors to that effect, but for the most part, it's a very popular program, and it has a lot of support. It does provide a lot of flexible funding for communities to meet the needs of their low moderate income population. So I don't see the program being eliminated. I do think that it's going to be a challenge in years to come as they try to balance, other issues down in Washington as to what the funding levels will be. But I think we saw a pretty significant cut this past year because it went up slightly, but there was in part due to the stimulus funding, and so there's a big drop off. I'd rather have it level funding. It would be a lot easier to plan from year to year.
In the public facilities and non-housing needs section, was there any thought to maybe putting some of those funds to use at the intersection changes they want to make at Fairfield Woods by the library and where the renovation is going to be done at the middle school? Because under one of the capital improvement program things, we were talking about doing some reductions in that, and it was going to be bonded. And the first selectman said he was going to talk to you. The last first selectman, Mr. Flato, said that he was going to be talking to you about whether any of that handicapped accessibility things could be covered by any grants or something else like to try to save on that bond amount. And I just didn't know whether, number one, that qualified in this area, whether it was thought about, or whether you're thinking about other federal programs that you may be, or state programs that you may be able to get state grants to cover handicapped accessibility and signal lights.
Yeah, I don't recall a specific conversation with respect to that project, but I know he's had a conversation with Bill Hurley, who I work with, to identify these priorities, and to the extent to which it might be eligible for CDBG, we can certainly take a look at it. There might be other funding sources out there, safe routes to the school or things like that. We might be able to access those funds as well.
The DPW street/sidewalk improvements, that's not designated at this point, right? It's just...
We have not designated, other than per our consolidated plan, we're looking to do sidewalk improvements this year. And as I said, we had 3 letters from residents as part of our consolidated plan outreach process, and each of those letters addressed the need for sidewalks, particularly in the Black Rock and Tonsas Hill neighborhoods. So with that said, we'd like to focus on infill or defective sidewalk conditions in those areas, and perhaps we can look at those locations that you mentioned as well.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public?
One other comment, if I may, I would make is it would be helpful, as much as I try to reach out to fellow department heads and elected officials as part of the planning process, I do see it would be helpful to have a greater coordination in terms of the capital planning process and looking at projects that appear in your capital plan that might be potentially eligible under CDBG. I know we've caught those kind of at the tail end. You know, for example, the Operation Hope shelter roof was originally proposed and funded under the CIP, and it came up during, this process at the same time last year that we potentially could fund it under CDBG, and so we did. But if there's better opportunity to kind of coordinate those, I think that would be helpful.
Have you had any discussions with Rich White on some of the needs that might be in town that might be a good connection? Okay, we'll look into that. Good comment, thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Kristen McCarthy, Baby, 1625 Millville Avenue. And just actually to follow up along those same lines, it strikes me that the list is parallel to the nonprofit list that we have. So having those conversations together, because I know the committee that's looking at the nonprofits and how we fund those, maybe that could be part of that conversation. I know there are federal requirements and it's a different process, but somehow working those conversations together too makes sense to me.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, number 9, Board of Education, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Board of Education to fund a multi-year roof warranty program for school roofs and to consider a special bond appropriation for such program. Mr. Cullen?
Thank you. Before I get started, I have some handouts.
Presents?
Yeah, I sent some to your homes Monday. Didn't bring them, or you didn't get them, I have extra copies.
I don't remember seeing it Monday either, but
I have them delivered to try and get them to you beforehand.
okay.
This is the actual letter and packet. This is the backup. This is the public doesn't need these, I can use them for other building committees and commissions, so I'm making extra copies, but this is what I got. Okay. This project came about last year as we worked with our roofing professional, building envelope professional. And I want to point out that in the audience is Pam Iacona, Board of Ed Vice Chairman here in support, and Sal Morbido, Manager of Construction, who was instrumental working with this team. And essentially we've got 5 elementary school roofs, as identified in the letter. Well, I should start off on March 8, 2011, the Board of Ed agreed unanimously to push this project through after a lengthy discussion. And what we've got is 5 elementary schools listed: Holland Hill, North Stratfield, Osborne Hill, Riverfield, and Roger Sherman, who just so happen to have all their roofs expiring, warranties expiring. 3 are this year and 2 are the beginning of next year. It also turns out that those 5 school roofs have the same manufacturer, John's Manville product that was put on. And the basis of this project is to spend about $900,000 to do some repairs where there's some wet insulation known. All the roofs are in good condition, but there are areas that the insulation's getting wet. There's some minor repairs that can be done. And the manufacturer will stand behind a 5-year extension, warranty extension, if we can do these repairs and fixes. Which essentially means not only will we get the 5-year extension for calling them for any issues that come up along the way, but also will mean we'll get extended life on the roof, which is expiring this year and beginning of next year. We find it to be an excellent deal. We provided the backup. The first packet you have is all the letters and information on the repairs and specs and fixes, the infrared scanning and everything we have to do with the consultants. The second piece of information I think is critical is this single sheet we provided for you. A lot of the work we've been doing that's been covered by the manufacturers that we didn't have to pay for. That shows that we do call in the manufacturers when there's repairs needed, and we've saved the district and the town a lot of money based on where we are today on all our roofs. And then the last piece of information is just a roof warranty PowerPoint that we're putting together to help you understand how many square feet of roofs we have, when they're all expiring. We like to get the maximum amount of years out of our roofs. Our PM program's been working great. The manufacturers are very happy with it. We've got someone monitoring the roofs on a regular basis, making repairs and reports and photographs. So this is, I think, an important piece. The town has an awful lot of roofs coming up and warranties expire. And I think it's a good idea to spend a little money now to extend these warranties for 5 years, which we will hopefully get another 10 years out of with a good PM program.
So these warranties, you said they're manufacturer's warranties. Are they going to do anything for covering the labor that's involved in making the repairs?
They do some labor. If it turns out that the problem with the roof that's found by our consultants or professionals is their fault, they cover the material and the labor usually.
And tell me how much you saved by how much you put in for the warranties and how much you saved. Again, I'm trying to find the page that you mentioned, and I don't have it in front of me, so.
It's this separate sheet, and I can review that with you.
That's all right.
Since we've implemented the PM program and been calling the manufacturers in, it dates back to 2006, 2007. It shows warranty reimbursements for $40,000 that year. At Ludlow High School, we had a couple of claims that were covered. These are all items that got fixed that we didn't have to pay for.
How much did the warranty cost, though?
The warranty came with the roof.
This is the original warranty?
Yeah, it's a 20-year warranty. And what we do is when we have problems or issues that come up from doing our tours and site visits with our professionals, we identify some and they'll tell us, this should be covered under warranty, let's call them in. And he fights them and works with them and works with us to get them covered. So we're trying to show that it's worth the money to call in the manufacturers, have good warranties, and do a good PM program. And based on the cost of roofing today and replacement, and filing with the state, we're looking at an elementary school costing $2 or $3 million to replace.
Yeah.
So with 5 schools to spend under $1 million to get an extra 5 years, and we're hopeful we'll get 10 out of that with a good PM program that'll expand the life of those roofs.
Okay.
Could you give me an example, say for example, Sherman? How old is the roof on Sherman?
Gentlemen, off the top of your head.
Sherman is, hang on a second, if I can find that, it is in the packet. I believe that is a 20-year-old roof. It's in the fine print, really. Sherman Elementary is a roof that was, most of it was put in 1991, so it's expiring, their 20-year warranty is expiring this year. A portion of it was put in 1996. And obviously the annex was just put in, so that's only a couple years old.
Are all 5 of these that are listed here, are they all, those roofs all 20 years old, and that's why they're all expired?
They're all within 6 months of their expiration of their 20-year warranty.
Okay. And for example, on a 41,700 square foot roof at Sherman, how much is the estimated cost to like replace that roof?
To replace the roof itself,
Yeah.
That would be $22 to $25 a square foot in today's dollars. So you're looking at somewhere between 2 and 3 million probably.
Sherman has, we're just looking at the warranty extension on just under 42,000 square feet. There's more.
Yeah.
If you took the whole building, but the expired part's about 42,000 times $25 a square foot. So you're looking over $1 million project just to replace that roof.
Just to replace that roof.
And I should tell you, one other thing to mention is we don't have a lot of time to make a decision on this. The manufacturer wants us to work 6 months before the actual roof expires.
And does the cost listed here include the cost for the repair of those wet areas?
Yep.
Yes. Includes the consultant, the infrared testing, specifications and bidding and all that, and the approximate cost to do all those repairs and fixes.
So basically, once they do their inspection and figure out what they need to do with this cost, they'll sign up for the warranty, and if there's anything they didn't see, they'll cover that as well.
Yes.
And how much more life can you get out of a roof like at Sherman if it's 20 years old already?
Probably another 10 years, using the systems that they would want us to use for the repairs enhancements on the roof.
And with the PM program we're doing, the manufacturers are very impressed that we've jumped on this and we've got somebody watching it. And we have a My Roof software program. Anytime there's a leak in a building, we document it and call them out. So we've got a good record going since 2007.
And this will give us a 5-year warranty,
Correct.
and we hope to get 10 more years out of it.
Correct.
And what happens during the last 5 years? We're just on the hook for it, or do
Yeah,
do they come to us with another warranty?
No, they probably would not come back with another warranty extension offer. But you're out there, within the packet, you'll see a graph that shows how much of our roofs are out of warranty presently, and what would happen if we're not doing any of the roof projects that we're proposing. We have a large drop-off in the amount of our roofs that are not under warranty. The hope is to do these projects, once you go through that packet, do these projects along with some other ones defined in our long-term facilities plan, and we would have a large percentage of our roofs maintained under warranty. If you want to get something more than the warranty period out of a roof, you want to get the most that you can get out of it.
Do you have any questions?
This is the graph.
Yes. You're going,
That's supposed to be 4 different colors that I'm supposed to be able to tell
the one I
apart.
sent to your home is gone.
Okay.
The copies we
You
made
know,
for the public.
What would be useful is if you have, because you're doing a presentation, there's a lot of paper here. What would be really useful is if you had something to put, maybe 4 or 5 sheets that had it pretty well condensed so that you could show it to the public and you could show it to us and make your case. Thank you. That makes it a lot easier to look at.
That's in the full packet of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, but right now we're looking at what's here. I guess, and if a portion of the roof at Sherman is, I'm sorry, let's go back to Sherman again, because you said that's 20 years, and 1996 is when the other portion that's not coming due now is coming due. And what proportion is that?
that's about 6,000 square feet.
Out of
So,
41? Or out of 46?
Out of probably close to 50,000, so 10, 12%.
Okay, so presumably then they'd offer us 5 years on that portion if,
As the roofs come up, the roofing manufacturer has to come out and
Make a
what
decision.
they call it scrubbing the roof. They'll say, yes, this is a good candidate for the program. No, it is not. And yes, at that point you could look at that.
Also depends on the manufacturer. This one happens to be by John Manville. We have a lot of different roof manufacturers on our school buildings.
I guess, in terms of, I'm certainly not an expert on roofs and not an expert on roof warranties. I know a little bit, but not necessarily enough to make that decision unequivocally. And what I was thinking is that, would it be possible that we approve this to go to the Board of Finance and also send it to the TFC to review and get their comments before the Board of Finance meeting?
What's the timing on this?
Well, I think we've got one of them coming up in August, so it's running a little tight, but I think if the manufacturer knew it was going through the town bodies, they could give us a little
That would
stretch on
forward it, well, you wouldn't
Yeah.
lose any time that way, and then you could at least get comments on it, just as, I mean, there's some sense to what you're presenting, and I just don't know enough about the proportions of the roofs that need it, and it's a, you know, it's a good thing to look at in depth, and, I don't know, that would be my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just did a couple quick calculations. So basically, it seems as though these, when I compare it to like doing a new roof now, the cost of this warranty for 5 years is 20% of the cost of a new roof.
If I can.
Yeah, sure.
The cost of the roof warranty extension program, what we outlined here, only a small portion of that is the actual warranty, the 5-year warranty. We're looking to extend the life of the roof another 10 years. Basically, those improvements, that $900,000 that we're looking at, is $5.75 a square foot. Over a 10-year life, you're looking at 57 cents a square foot to extend the life. Looking at a new roof, using numbers that were given to us by TFC when there was a discussion for the senior center roof, you're looking $26.50 a square foot over a lifetime of 20, 25 years. You're looking at $1 something, so it's cheap money in comparison to a roof replacement.
So that's what I guess I'm looking at, because if you think that we
You
could
use a different divider than I
if you
did.
think that we could spend 20% of the cost of a new roof and get half of the life of it,
Yes.
which is, a new roof would be 20-year life?
Well, if you're
It could
putting-
be. Most of them are 15 or 20 years, depending on what system you pick.
So, for example, if we spent on the state, I'm just taking one of them at a time. So
Sure.
Sherman, we spent $188,000. Based on your calculation at $22 a square foot, that's $917,400 for at $22 a square foot. So we'd be spending 20% of that money. But you're telling me we're going to get 10 years of life out of it,
Correct.
which is basically half of the life of a brand-new roof
Correct.
for only 20% of the cost.
Correct.
That seems like a pretty good deal to me.
It is, and that's why we're bringing it forward.
Based on us
Okay.
keeping the PM program going and working
Okay.
with them on a
Yeah.
yearly basis.
It's kind of like an old car, you know,
Yeah.
it's ugly, but I need a transmission
Sure.
in it, it's good money to put
I
into
mean,
it.
to me, it sounds like a good idea. I agree with Sherri, though, that we're not roofing experts, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I agree with her. I think that maybe we can send this to TFC, just to get a
Yeah,
quick
just-
report on what
Sure.
they generally
Sure.
think,
The biggest
just because there's
complaints-
experts there.
The biggest complaints we get is a lot of people don't think the manufacturer ever pays. You know, you've got a warranty, he never gets called in, he never has to cover anything. That's why we gave you this sheet to show you that we are calling them in and we are
Yeah,
getting
and that's,
things
was
covered.
going to be one of my questions is, warranties, there's different, levels of warranty, and, I think the town attorney's here, I mean, it's all how it's written.
Yeah.
But if you've had experience with this company, and our experience has been that when you call them in, they're not nickel and diming us and being like, well, that's
No,
not covered because X, Y, Z, and we've been able to use them, and you don't feel like they, try to avoid their responsibility, and I feel a little better about it.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, it's strictly on their product, which is usually the membrane. We do have issues with the parapet and the building envelope. They're done by masons and other people, but generally the membrane itself, roof drains, anything to do with the roof itself is usually covered.
Usually a roof, the roof doesn't fail in the middle of the field. It fails, the failures usually happen at seams, at edges, at penetrations, and you're improving those points that are vulnerable. So that's why you're getting such bang for the buck.
And it's labor and materials they cover.
Yes.
So we just call them up, you make one call to them, and they send their person outside.
And our
Right.
PM consultant draws it up, he writes it up, does the packet and documents it, photographs it,
You
and,
said it's labor if it was the fault of the material, right?
correct.
So if it was a fault of like the flashing and not the material, somebody's workmanship, then that wouldn't cover it.
It depends, because when you get a warranty on a brand-new roof,
Right.
a representative from the manufacturer comes down and walks the roof with the installer. It's a cooperation between them. They certify the installer
Right.
to assure that they have a certain level of expertise and workmanship, and then they come and verify it. So they'll come out to a roof, and they might turn their nose up at something and say, that item's not good, fix that, call me back, and then I'll give you a warranty. And that happens every time we have a new roof.
And then the warranty is generally, you said 15 years?
Our warranty's on 20 years.
20 years, okay. Well,
A
then,
lot of them were 15 years, but the new standard is 20 years because the state requires us to have it when we reimburse on a roof.
well, if that's the case, just explain to me McKinley School, because wasn't that like 8 years old? And the issue with the roof and that wasn't going to be covered because it was
That's-
past?
It's
the
not
parapet.
it's not the roof, it's the masonry.
It's the masonry parapet.
It's
But I mean-
actually above the roof.
Okay, so that part they don't look at? You know, when you were
That's
saying
not
walking
that-
it with the
That was
person who
done by
installed it?
Bridgeport
and-
Restoration, a mason company that did the parapet and had to do the flashing around it.
It's the wall construction.
So the
Right,
roof
but the
membrane
roof-
comes up and ends.
It's nearby, but it's not the roof.
Well, that's why I was talking about flashing before, that's why I was asking. So,
Right.
so there are issues, there are places where that won't come into play because it's not exactly the roof
Correct.
area. And it might be areas with parapet or flashing that it
Correct.
may not. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I'm happy to send it to the Board of Finance for review, and I'd also like to send it to the TFC so that they can
That would
review
be
it a
great.
little more in depth for us.
Very good.
I'd love to hear their report.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
You could just
We can-
Thank you very
refer
much.
to them and just tell them, as
Sure.
soon as they can get back, we'll put it on the agenda, I guess, right?
Right, and Jen, we send it over to the TFC. Okay. Okay, so a motion to accept this and send it to the Board of Finance and also to the TFC?
Yes.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great.
Thank you very
gentlemen.
much.
Sal, here's your original.
You can keep that if you want, we have pictures.
Nope.
Okay, take it, thanks. Okay, moving right along. Item number 10, Board of Selectmen, discussion, consideration, and nomination of candidate for interim first selectman.
I didn't know this was on the agenda.
Sure you didn't. Okay.
Let me clean this stuff up.
I'd like to make a motion
Wow,
to
right out of the
discuss the Board and consider nomination for first selectman. I'd like to nominate Michael Tetro. He's on the Board of Finance. He's been on the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. He's been on the RTM. He's been elected to all three of those town-wide bodies, and probably a few more that I neglected to mention. And I think he's also the Democratic nominee. Our party went through the process that's stated in the charter, and also the process that the state statutes require, and we unanimously, the Democratic Party unanimously selected Michael Tetro as our nominee. So I put forth his name, and I know there's no second needed per the Roberts Rules of Order, so I'd like to discuss that, and then
All right.
take a vote.
Okay. You want to talk about that anymore, or you want?
No,
You handed it over to me.
I would just like to say, hear you say, yes, I'm in favor of him.
All right, first of all, number one, I want to congratulate you again, Sherri, and volunteering to continue on after Ken. I know you have other business responsibilities and some things you're helping your mom with, and I know there's just some extra responsibilities on your back that you necessarily don't want to have, but I appreciate it, and thank you for the town and filling in for Ken while we try to figure out this process. In regards to Mike and I had a chance to talk today. Mike and I have been friends and done business together on a personal, outside of politics. We've worked well together. We were on the RTM together, and Mike chaired a committee on trying to find out about the state reimbursement process for some of our school buildings, and we worked very closely on that, and I think very well on that committee together. I've always had a lot of respect for Mike, and to me, it is nothing about Mike. What I'd like to discuss has nothing to do with Mike himself. I think Mike is very qualified. He's a very bright guy, and he can definitely fill the shoes of first selectman. But I would like to talk about the process and about where I am in that process and where I am in where we're going. We're definitely in uncharted territories. This is really never happened that my research has shown before, this process. I saw that in I think it was around the early 1920s, a first selectman resigned, and the two selectmen co-managed the town for a while, which
You're going to
let's
have to
say-
do more
let's
than
just-
Boy Scouts
Let's
to
just say
become
we're happy
managing.
where you and I aren't having to do that. But I do have a lot of respect for Mike. But there's a couple things I do want to talk about. The question is, and it ultimately comes down to, is are we going to be putting in a first selectman as a successor first selectman who at least may be running for first selectman, or should we be putting in an interim first selectman? And that's what I've been trying to weigh for ever since Ken's at least started talking about resigning, even though that process seemed to be dragged out. I've gone through this process just as you, as Sherri, in regard to being where we each replaced two great selectmen in Denise and Ralph, where we unfortunately had to come into that process. I can only really talk about my experience because, I lived it. And I know Ken was thinking about a number of different Republicans. He did talk to me about that process and called me about it. And Ken vetted me about whether I was going to run for first selectman. He asked me the question straight out. He wanted to know whether I was going to run for first selectman. I actually thought it was actually an appropriate question that he asked me that question, because his concern was that he thought that the board, this board ran well with you and Ralph. And he did not want me, if I was going to be running for first selectman against him, to come in and be a very contentious thing. He not only asked me, before he asked me, he had a conversation with Senator McKinney about it and wanted to know from Senator McKinney whether he was going to, whether I would run for first selectman. In both instances, I gave him an honest answer. I told him I wasn't, because I was not prepared to close my law practice. But I thought it was a legitimate question to be asked at the time. So the question becomes, I think, when I'm thinking about it, one of fairness, I guess. Not only fairness to both sides of the political fence, but really fairness, I think, to the taxpayer of Fairfield on whether and who should be choosing this person. The charter says it's you and I, but you and I were not elected. You and I were appointed. And we only have 4 or 5 months to go until the election. To me, this decision would be very different if it was a year ago, and the person was going to be sitting in the seat for a year and a half or so like that. But with being so close to the election, my thoughts go to whether we should just be choosing a successor. Kind of a placeholder. Somebody who will just run the town for the next 4 or 5 months. And as opposed to somebody who is going to be running for first selectman. Some of the reasons that I've kind of thought about and considered and weighed are that anybody who moves into the seat who plans on running for the first selectman's position in November may weigh every decision they make from that moment on against how is this going to be sold to the electorate in November. I mean, it's just a natural human thought. I mean, you'd almost have, I don't know how you could separate the two, to be quite honest with you, because you'd have to think on how is, while you might be saying I'm going to do it for the best interest of the town, you'd also, I think, be saying is, how's this going to be written up in the newspapers? Am I going to be attacked on this? On what grounds? Things like that. And even if you weren't doing that, there could be the appearance of that. people that you're running against may be coming out in the same newspaper articles where you're announcing something saying, well, that person's only doing that because they're running for first selectman in November. And I kind of have a problem with that. The other problem on the political side, I mean, you and I are both involved in politics. I mean, there's no doubt that if someone is put in that seat, they get a political advantage in an upcoming election. They are in the papers all the time. There are pictures in the paper. You're opening businesses, you're cutting ribbons, you're doing all sorts of stuff. You also have the ability to kind of control your agenda. Now, and I talked to Mike about this, it is a double-edged sword. And I told him that the fact that he wants to do this, and he knows this, it is a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. He could make a mistake along the way, and just for that sole mistake, it would become political fodder. So it is a double-edged sword. I mean, he's brave enough to want to do that. I think he trusts his abilities, but it concerns me that somebody would be put in for such a short time to become an incumbent. To me, an incumbency is something that you earn, and you earn that by the vote of the electorate. Ken Flato wants to, open businesses, smile, Glenn had, whatever, kiss babies. He's earned that a right during his upcoming election because the electorate put him in. In this case, you and I would be putting him in, and you and I haven't even been voted into office. So I have a problem with that. When I look at putting somebody in the position who is going to basically be a placeholder, I looked at some of the pros and cons of that. Some of the pros on that would be that person would not really have any political influences. They could actually try to run the town without wondering, how's my decision going to affect my chances of winning in November? I think we do have a number of people that would qualify that. I wish you could do it. You would have been my first choice.
And I also would have been someone not elected by anyone.
Yeah.
I was appointed, so
Yeah.
that basically kills your argument about the appointed versus let me just finish, because you've had a lot of time to speak for. I think there's a lot of things to be said. Anybody who comes into the position, whether they're appointed or elected, is going through a process. When we were selected, it was a process. When somebody leaves the Board of Finance and is put on in the position because someone vacated it, that's a process. And generally, it's been traditional that we have taken the suggestions of the parties. Now, I can't comment about what Ken did or didn't ask you. I never asked you anything. Ken never discussed that with me. So for whatever comments were made, I can't tell you. Nobody ever asked me that, partially because I wasn't filling a spot where somebody had permanently left. We were hoping Denise would come back. So I was looking at this as a short-term position to hold the place while she hopefully recuperated. That unfortunately wasn't the case. But that same type of question was never asked of me, and there was no reason to ask it of me at the time. I think that there's fairness to the town in terms of making sure there's accountability to the taxpayer. And anybody who comes in here as a placekeeper, they have the same human reactions to what the newspaper writes about them, the questions that are asked about them, making people happy, not making people happy. In fact, maybe they want to make more people happy because they're going to leave and they don't want to mess anything up, so they don't do anything while they're there. You have somebody who comes in who's accountable, who has a clue about what they're doing, and Mike's been involved in the process for a long time. We have followed the process of going to our party, having an election. People knew they could come and say that they were interested. It was a unanimous decision by our party, and the process for every position, every member of our Democratic Town Committee and Republican Town Committee, as you well know, is a representative of those party people. They're based on the number of people in town and per district, and so they all are elected in a sense, and that's who votes for the replacements. That's the party system. So I think we have to look towards what's in the best interest of the town. as you said, it's a double-edged sword. If somebody comes in here, it's just as easy to make a mistake or have some oddball thing happen. There's, to a certain extent, everything in life is luck. So there's, you can work hard and that can help your luck. But at the same time, there are things that can happen that you have no control over. And so whoever comes in and sits in the seat is going to have to look at every situation and judge it, and hopefully we choose somebody who has integrity and is going to do what's in the best interest of the town. So I think that our party went through the process, we followed it, there's always the same process. This may be unusual in that we're all appointed in this case, but other than that, it's really not unusual at all. The process is the process is the process. So it's an established process, and as I said, Mike was unanimously endorsed, and I submit his name for election.
Well, the process that you talk about has been, number one, an inconsistent process. It's at least when Ken has been here for the last years, sometimes he's followed and sometimes he's not. And he's actually told me in the past, this is on other things, yeah, you can bring me somebody that the Republican Town Committee puts forward, but I'll look at that person. I'm not committing that I'm going to follow that process. And he's told me that before. So, and he's told other chairmen, that's when I was chairman of the Republican Town Committee, he's told others. I see Steve Elworthy right there raising his hand that he told him that. There's no definitive, there's nothing in the charter that says that. And we've had to, he's been there for 10 years. We've had to live with that. And we understand that. He's like, you bring me somebody good, somebody I can work with, I'll put it forward. You put in somebody I don't like, I don't feel like I can work with, I won't put it forward. I mean, even on this own body, even in 1 year that I've been here, I asked Ken, if there's a Republican coming up for a seat, can you just please let me know so I can let the Republican Town Committee know? That was completely inconsistently followed. Sometimes he came to me.
Well, if it makes
sometimes he didn't come to me.
If it makes you feel any better, he never came to me about a Democrat. So if that makes you feel any
I'm
better,
just telling you. I asked him. He said he would do it, and he never. I mean,
yes, but
Ryan, who was here today,
right.
No one came to me about Ryan. A guy from the head of the golf commission came to me about Ryan, and he seemed like a great guy, and we're perfectly, willing to do that. But there's many times I got here, even the information wasn't supplied, that I'm finding out about a new appointment to a board or commission, and he has a Republican on there that I've never even heard of before. So it's not been a consistent process in regards to how we do this. And I also want to say that regardless of how you and I were chosen, I consider the first selectman of this town to be a completely different position than anything else. It's the administrative head of the town. It's the taxpayer's position. You can say boards, commission, even on this board as a selectman is one thing. Choosing a first selectman is completely different. I just think it is. It's a completely different process, and it's a completely different position, and it's a fairly high-paid position compared to other positions in town, and rightfully so. The taxpayers should have I think, should have more input on who that person should be. And although the charter says that you and I go through this process if we agree, and see whether we agree, and then it goes to the next step to the Democratic electors. I think that with 4 to 5 months to go, basically, before the election, that to put somebody in who is planning on running and has at least submitted paperwork saying that they're forming a campaign, I just don't, in my gut, that's the hardest problem to get over. And I've weighed this stuff. I understand that we could go 30 days. And ultimately, Mr. Tetro will be sitting between us because there's nothing that I can do about it. And I've weighed that. Is it worth going through? But in my gut, if I don't agree with the process, if I don't believe that that's the way we should be putting an interim first selectman in, then how can I, just because you're going to hold a gun to my head, doesn't mean that I should do it.
Well, I'm not really holding, I don't have a gun here, so I haven't put the gun to your head. But, and I also want to point out that things like the Golf Commission are not elected positions, they're all appointed. So if you talk about that and you talk about something like the Board of Finance or the TPZ or the Board of Selectmen or the First Selectman, those are all elected by the townspeople. All the other ones you're talking about, which we can talk about can and process, and I think we would probably agree on almost every part of that. That's been, I
Yeah.
think, the biggest gripe that I've had with him over the years, and it's probably the biggest gripe that you've had, with all due respect to Ken, because he worked very hard for many years, and he put in a lot of time. So I don't want to diminish what he did, or his, the time that he spent, or what his intentions were, because everybody has their own way of dealing with things, and, Ken's way was his way, and it may not be the same as my way or your way, but it was his, and so we've lived with that. At this point in time, I'm hoping that we're going to go into a period where we have a little more transparency. I think that's happening throughout, government, and people are trying to do that. And I would hope that, and also, let me just point out that sometimes when people have been appointed, for example, when John Sullivan was in his last term, when Jackie Durrell and Carl Dickman were on the board with him, Mary Katona passed away. And so the nominee ended up being Jean Sturgis, who wasn't very involved with the Democratic Party at the time, and she had apparently promised that she would not run again, but then she liked it and she changed her mind, and she ended up being defeated by the party in a primary. However, she was intending to run again. So people get into a situation and they may think they're not going to like it, or they're not going to do it, or that they like it. And they may change their mind, because the actual isn't always the same as the perceived of what it will be like. So anyway, I still put Mike's name in nomination in the hopes that you'll see that having somebody in there who's accountable to the taxpayer, who's fair to everybody, and has been involved for a long time and shown his colors throughout consistently, it would be the best choice for selectmen.
Well, at this point, I can't second it. I will continue to take it under advisement, but I cannot second that at this point. There are some other people then that I would like to discuss, and at least talk to you about, and at least put their names on the table for you to discuss about, because I understand it has to be a Democrat, and I am not trying to stall this. As I'm saying, I just believe that there should be an interim first selectman that is not going to be running for election. That is kind of one of my main criteria. One of the people's names I was going to throw out, I cannot anymore. And I talked to her, was Krista McCarthy-Vane. She was sitting right here. I mean, we had talked about it. Now I see that she's filed for a campaign with Mike, and to me that is no longer a possibility. But another person, and this person I've given a lot of thought to, and it's someone I've known for like 10 years, and you know this person very well, is Tom Bremer. And I think we got to talk about Tom, because the more I look at Tom, he's the perfect person for the position. He's worked in the first selectman's office as the chief of staff. He has been there for over 5 years. He has been, I worked with him on the Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Board of Directors. I'm no longer on the Board of Directors, but I've worked as their attorney recently because I moved out of district from Greenfield Hill. But an extremely bright guy. I mean, worked at U.S. Surgical, became general counsel, was one of the top guys in that company. Went into somewhat of a retirement, and then Ken chose him to be his chief of staff. Unbelievable, bright guy to be the chief of staff. I was surprised he would even take the position. Has worked on every major transaction that has happened through the first selectman's office in the last 5 years. He's been on the bargaining, the union contract bargaining committee that Ken put together of about 5 people with Mr. Saxall, Ken, and others, and would be able to make the transition without missing a heartbeat. He'd be able to start tomorrow and knows everything that's going on. Has worked with Jen, has worked with the entire staff. He's worked with every town department head. He is well respected across town hall. And would be the perfect person. I mean, the guy's a trained attorney, worked in a Fortune 500 company, could easily run this town for 4 to 5 months and finish the Flato administration, basically. I mean, Ken took us up to about 6 months before his administration was supposed to end. Tom's been involved with it the entire time. I think he would be the perfect person to walk us right up until the election day. That would allow Mike to run his campaign. It would allow everybody else in town and allow the taxpayers and public of this town to make a decision on who they want to be the next elected first selectman. Who do they want? What do you think of Tom?
What I think is that we followed a process. Our party followed the process that the charter and the state statutes regulate. We selected them. I've talked to the members of the party. It was unanimous amongst our party. And while Tom is the chief of staff, he is not accountable to the taxpayer, and that's a big portion of what our party believes. And so I can't comment about anything other than we've selected our person who we feel would be best. That's the process that has to be taken, and we believe that accountability is the highest and most important thing. And there's no other, if you don't put somebody in there who's got to come back and look in the eye of the taxpayer again, then you're not getting that accountability. So I can't, I think I could say that it's just as easy to say that there would be issues related to having somebody who doesn't have to run again, to the fact that having somebody who goes in there now will be running in the fall, and they may or may not have an advantage based on situations that occur while they're in office. So I think that we've probably finished discussion, because I know I'm not going to change from Mike, and that's my nominee, and here we go.
Okay, well, I guess we could resume our conversation. I will just tell you other people that I would consider that are on your side of the aisle. Sue Barrett, I think, would be great. Kate Doyle would be great. Stan Lesser would be great. He served as a selectman before. Wally Flynn would be great. These are just other people, and I'd be willing to have an open conversation and bring these people before us and have conversations to see whether they'd be willing to fill the position.
Well, I'd like to point out that all of those people are members of the town committee. All of them presumably voted unanimously for Mike to be the nominee, and if they had intention, they've had ample opportunity to express that they had intentions for that, and none of those names, including Tom, who's also on our town committee, ever came up. So that's all I could tell you.
So I put Tom Bremmer's name forward, and your answer is no.
My answer to anybody but Mike is no, because that's who my party put forward to me, and that's who we believe is accountable, and we followed the process, and that's where I'm.
Okay. Well, I'd like to put it on the next calendar, and we'll talk about it again then.
Okay. Did you finish these?
Yes, they're all.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in
Actually,
favor?
new business?
New business, oh, sorry, is there new business? Any new business?
The only new businesses, I kind of briefly mentioned it to you, was getting the town attorney in here to give us an update, and I don't know whether you can, Dick, on where we stand with the softball field. Because I was kind of disturbed to learn that we are being sued. The town is being sued?
Yeah.
Or on the TPZ decision on the girls' softball field.
Yes, Hoyden's Hill,
Is that something you can talk in public, or do you want to go into executive session?
really, I can talk in public, it's not
Okay,
complicated.
I'd just like an update on where we stand.
The case has not even come to a return date yet. The town has been served. It's a plain vanilla, you're spoiling the environment. It's a 22-819 intervention. There was a verified petition filed at the TP&Z level. The return date hasn't yet occurred, and it'll be treated like any other appeal.
Okay. Well, I would just hope that to the extent that you can expedite that case, that we do so, because we've been waiting a long time. That money's been appropriated by the RTM and the other bodies, and I would like to get that expedited as soon as possible for these girls.
I was on the original land acquisition committee in 1997. That was one of the 7 parcels that was chosen. It was chosen for active recreation. I share your sentiments, Mr. Walsh.
What can be done between now and?
I don't want to discuss litigation strategy.
Okay, that's fine.
Can I add something?
Please do, Steve.
When Denise and Ken and I were together on the board, Denise and I had our only vote that we agreed on for 4 years. That vote was to be used for active.
Active
Yes.
recreation.
That was our vote. That was Denise's wish and my wish. Ken was not in favor. Just for
Okay.
point of information.
Well, I know that we're all looking towards that being resolved favorably towards the town, and as quickly as possible. 2 more things. One point of personal privilege. This evening, I don't know when this is going to be on television, but This evening at 7:30, there's the Holocaust commemoration for the town. It's a wonderful event. If anyone hasn't been there before, or even if you have, I think you'll really enjoy it if you come, and it's very moving, it's very informational, and helps everybody remember. Second thing is...
Where's that gonna be held?
I'm sorry, that's at the First Church Congregational at 7:30 this evening, the 4th of May. And there's coffee and dessert afterwards. And there's also a silver Honda CRV in the parking lot with flashers on, plate 721 TBW. So if your car's out there, you better go out and take care of your lights. Okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Sherri,
Aye.
can I have?
One more?